Welcome, Rapes and Germs, to the Golden View here on the Masochist Gaming Network, and as always, I'm your host, Nicholas McConaughey. Now, with the formal introductions out of the way, let's get started, because I have quite a bit that I want to say about this game in particular. Twisted Metal is, as a gamer, my guilty pleasure. From the very beginning of the series that holds the distinction of being the longest-running franchise in PlayStation history, I have followed the series. I played the first one on the PlayStation, I played the hell out of Twisted Metal Black, and even have gotten my hands on Twisted Metal 3 and Twisted Metal Head-On. The reason why it's my guilty pleasure as a gamer is because the games absolutely suck. They suck. They suck. And I don't want to hear anyone try to convince me otherwise, because my mind is made up on this. The controls for these games have always been horrendously constructed. The story for the games is always below what the standard should be for all games, and now with revisiting the previous games, it makes me think that the nostalgic amount of fun that I had with the series is fictitious. With this being said, I have absolutely no idea as to what hooked my interest in the series in the first place, and why deep down, even if I'm a little ashamed to admit it, I love this series. The controls since the first game hadn't improved any with Twisted Metal Black or Head-On, and the storyline is still just barely adequate. I think that it'd probably have something to do with the characters that were implemented within the game. The story of Mr. Grimm was always really enjoyable to me, and there is certainly a reason as to why Sweet Tooth is as popular as he is. I remember really digging the cutscenes for Twisted Metal Black whenever I was younger, even if now that I look back at him, they really aren't that special. I guess in the end it does take something for nostalgia to be made, but these games weren't really great games, or even good games by any means. Nostalgia can be a powerful thing, and it summarizes exactly why I went out of my way to purchase Twisted Metal for the PS3. For those that don't know, Twisted Metal is a vehicle combat video game developed by Eat, Sleep, Play, and was published by Sony Computer Entertainment for the PlayStation 3. It is a reboot of the Twisted Metal franchise, and was originally planned to be released in October of 2011, only to be held off until early 2012. The game was in development for nearly 3 years, and the plans for the game often shifted one way and then the other. One of the initial ideas for the background setting was a post-apocalyptic wasteland, however that idea was eventually scrapped by co-director Scott Campbell. Personally, I honestly would have been alright with seeing a different setting for the game, as it would have been nice for them to have taken some chances as opposed to making a rehash of the same story, but I digress. The game, much like the other installments in the series, focuses on a tournament hosted by the legendary Calypso, who every year picks a select few to play in his competition, and if they win, he'll grant them one wish of any kind. Although kinda like a genie, he usually finds a way to twist the words in his favor. The story of the game passes through 3 segments and the 3 playable characters, Sweet Tooth, Mr. Grimm, and Dollface. Immediately after seeing this, I found myself growing unsettled. One of the things that I enjoyed about Twisted Metal Black was how individualized the characters come across. Every character, one way or the other, had their own individual story and point of origin, whereas this game chose to include only the origin of 3 characters. The 3 most known characters of the series, no less. Throughout the game, you'll come across numerous meetings with the Preacher, but other than that, it's pretty much exclusive to the 3 characters. Sweet Tooth's story is pretty much the same as what we'd expect. He's a former ice cream man that snapped, killed his family, and Shades of Michael Myers is after the remaining members of his family that he needs to kill. Mr. Grimm, however, was changed pretty drastically. The original story was that he had to eat his military friend to survive after being held hostage, wore his skull as a helmet, and wished to get him back to life. However, this time around, not only has he gotten a change in skin color, but a certain remodeling in terms of character. His father was a racer that made a bad turn, killing himself and thus sending Mr. Grimm down a troubled road of mistreatment. I think that I like the story of this the most, honestly, but mostly because of the portrayal of the characters. Dollface's character also takes considerable changes, hers being that she was a model that got in a car wreck and because of her strong paranoia and insecurity, thinks she's incredibly ugly. She had a mask put on her by someone that promised to make her look beautiful once again, but now she can't get it off, so her wish is to get the mask off of her face and to become a supermodel. The layout of each character has potential to make something admirable, however the stories are too short to progress to anything concrete or great. I enjoyed the stories, as well as the animation that went along with them, however, they're too short and too unrefined for me to give them any more credit than that. The game should have had more character development, and they should have taken more time with the story as opposed to treating it like nothing more than an afterthought. But since they didn't, the story, which could have been so much better, is only getting an average rating of 7 out of 10. Believe it or not, the controls are actually the silver lining that successfully managed to save this game from repeating the mistakes of the past games in the franchise. Which is strange because quite honestly, some of the biggest criticisms from critics who gave this game a much more positive rating than what I am, have actually cited the controls as being incredibly difficult to master, and which maybe they are. However, to me, after playing all the other Twisted Metal games, these are a walk in the park and a large step in the right direction. They are much more comfortable and friendly to the gamer, albeit they still aren't comfortable by any means. They still have the reckless and directionless steering that jitters around freely whatever it may please, but it doesn't really hurt the gameplay except for the racing, which you better believe I'm going to talk about in just a second. I find myself having a hard time praising the controls with how frustrated with this franchise I am. It took them 7 games of the main series to get it right with the controls, and they still aren't as good as they should be for the Legendary series. However, the controls, for their drastic improvement over the previous games, are getting a 7.5 out of 10 from me. For those wondering, whenever I review a game, I review the game for the story, controls, graphics, gameplay, and I occasionally add other snippets for miscellaneous rating if it's needed. The last piece of the grading system is the overall gaming experience, which covers the amount of honest enjoyment that I had with the game. I tell you this because I know numerous find online play to be a crucial part of a game's playability, which I can agree with to a certain degree. However, I find it to be an addition, and not a big part of the game as a whole, which is why I choose to summarize that category in my overall gaming experience. With this being said, the online play is actually very enjoyable. The gameplay is where I begin to be a little bit less praising of the remade rendition of the Twisted Metal franchise, because quite frankly it doesn't deserve much in the way of praising. I'm talking about the story mode, which features a series of matches, boss battles, and other events. Let me start off by emphasizing what I said earlier about the game being too short, with saying that there is not enough matches involved in each particular story, and there's not enough innovative matches to begin with. They added 1 or 2 new matches. Most notably for me was probably the cage match, which basically means that you have to be in a particular square on the map at a certain time, and if you're not, you start taking damage. Other than that, there's really nothing at all innovative. I would have enjoyed something different, but I won't complain too much with that not being the case. There's only so much that you can do, and quite honestly, I think that most fans of the franchise come for the mayhem and the destruction, which this game is filled with. The matches are as fun as they have ever been, and honestly, they easily match my nostalgic view for the Twisted Metal series. Yes, Twisted Metal in reality is a below-average series, but because I played it as a kid, I remember it with such fondness. In my head, I think of destruction, mayhem, and just having an absolute blast, which is what this game provides for real. The problem lies in the racing, which has got to be some of the worst that I've ever seen in a game. I don't think that I can possibly summarize how atrocious the racing is in this game. If you choose a big car, you're too slow to keep up with the fast cars. So the answer is simple, you choose a fast car. No. Because if you choose a fast car, you're smaller, and therefore you're going to be constantly sent flying around by the bigger cars. When you are sent flying, that's not a hyperbole. You are sent flying dozens of feet away from the track, sometimes off of cliffs, and you can't get back on without having to take several minutes to do so. There's no respawn button, so if you're knocked off, you're screwed, plain and simple. Oh, and remember that jittery steering that I talked about earlier? That comes into place in this more than ever. The tracks in this game are some of the curviest that I've ever seen, sending you one way, then the other, which would be fine, but the steering is so horrible that there's no way that you'll be able to function with it all. For informational purposes only, if we were talking about the gameplay for the matches, it'd have gotten an 8 out of 10. However, because the racing gets a goose egg, the gameplay is brought down to a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, if I said that the controls were the silver lining to this game, then I lied, because the graphics in this game are absolutely phenomenal. I'm not even just talking about the cutscenes, which look absolutely fantastic. The cutscenes look to be clips of actual people merged together with moments of animation, and as weird as that sounds, it turns out to look very, very good. Besides that, the animation of the gameplay itself is very, very enjoyable. It is especially a sight to see whenever you take into account the advancements in graphics since Twisted Metal Head-On. The scenery is also very well constructed, with the levels being designed excellently with a wide array of depth to them, which is why I'm giving the graphics a perfect 10 out of 10. I know that I was very negative at the beginning of this review, and rightfully so. The games in this series didn't progress very well, whether it be awesome music provided by Rob Zombie in Twisted Metal 3, or the great scenes from Twisted Metal Black. They never really got it right with the controls. They didn't necessarily do it here either, but at least it's a step in the right direction, which is always a good thing. The gaming experience for this game for me is getting a 7 out of 10. I'm praising the game for easily being the best of the Twisted Metal series, finally providing the mayhem in a way that is actually playable, as well as providing enjoyable cutscenes. However, I can't overlook the shortness of the gameplay, which frustrated me beyond belief, considering that I took a leap of faith and bought this game even with the price being considerably high. I also can't overlook the frustration when it came to the racing aspects of the game. For all it is, I think that this might be the very first truly good game in the Twisted Metal franchise, which is why my overall rating of this game averages out to a 7.6 out of 10. Thanks for joining me on this edition of The Golden View here on the Masochist Gaming Network, and I'll see you next time.